Idols, images. That's what we're looking at today. It's the second commandment. You shall not make for yourself an idol. So that's what we're going to look at today. Hi, I'm Pastor Harry Zanting from the First Christian Reformed Church of Red Deer. And today we're continuing our series on the Ten Commandments, on the second commandment. And it's part of, this is the video version and of a class that I'm teaching presently in my own church as well. You might want to read Exodus 24 through 6. We will look through that as we go along, but we're loosely using that as a teaching outline. So it begins with this in verse 4 of Exodus 20. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. And we'll stop there for the moment. So an idol is an image or a copy. Now, this can be taken in two ways. Are we talking about an image or copy of God, or an image of other gods? We will deal mostly, I think, or today we're going to deal mostly with the first one, an image of God, while the second one, really in a way, has already been dealt with in the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. Now let's set up this commandment with the golden calf story in Exodus. Just a little bit of context. Text in Exodus 20. The people of Israel are given the Ten Commandments. They're at Mount Sinai and they're given the Ten Commandments, and one of them being ours, of course, that we're looking at today. Immediately following the giving of the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20, God begins to talk about the second command. So Exodus 20 verse 22 says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Tell the Israelites this, you have seen for yourself that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourself gods of silver or gods of gold. So the Ten Commandments are given, and right away it seems to stress this one about the making of idols. Then if we continue along in Exodus 24, they make a covenant between God and his people. A covenant is made. It says there, then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people, and I think that would include the Ten Commandments. And then it says they responded, we will do everything the Lord has said, we will obey. And then Moses goes up the mountain for 40 days. And within that short time, this is what happens. Exodus 32, verse 1. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. So you notice all of a sudden it says, Now make us gods who will go before us. And Aaron takes the gold and smelts it and makes a calf out of it. And then they build an altar and they have a celebration. So what's going on here? Have they made another god? Or are they worshiping God through this golden calf? Well, I think it is the latter. Now, here's the thing. God is invisible. And so it's hard for us to stay focused when we can't see something in front of us. Now, as long as Moses was there, he kept them focused, but he's gone. Now, I can relate to that a little bit. I know that's one of the struggles I have with God. I can't see him, and I want to see God. So what they do is, the Israelites there, they make an idol, an image, a copy of God. Actually, the word idol that's used, the Hebrew word that's used in the commandment refers to a graven image. Okay? Something that's carved with a tool and shaped by human hands. They're taking from creation, and then they make it into a shape to represent God. But there's a danger in doing that. We do use symbols of God all the time, but what happens is sometimes we make it into something more. We can easily move from just an image to assigning some power to the image. The image itself we consider powerful. Take, for example, in the Bible, the ephod. Now, that was a special priestly garment, very fancy, very beautiful, that the priest wore when he ministered between God and the people. He was the kind of go-between, and he had this garment. Well, we read in the book of Judges that Gideon makes a special one out of gold, and the people began to worship it. They bowed down and worshipped it. Another example is the bronze snake in Numbers 21. Right? The people have rebelled against God, and God sends snakes, and they bite them. And then Moses makes a bronze snake, and they say, "Look at it, and you will be spared." And when they look at it, they live. We find in 2 Kings 18, it says, he, and that's King Hezekiah, broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made, for up to that time the Israelites had been burning incense to it. Wow, that's what happens, right? Now, let me just think about this for a moment. Let me suggest that we do that too sometimes. Take an old Bible. How have you felt about that? You know, it's old, it's ratty, it's kind of falling apart. But boy, we don't dare throw it away, because there's something holy about it. But is there a specialness to it? It's just a book. It's not about the book. What the words describe, of course, are important, but it's not the book. Or take, maybe sometimes we wear a cross, right, for jewelry. Now that may be to indicate that we follow Christ. You know, that's true. But do we sometimes wear it for luck? Like it has some power? That's what I mean. It's so easily we do that. Now there is a place for images and symbols and the like. But here's, again, back to Exodus 20, verse 5. It's, "You shall not bow down to them or worship them." To bow down is to recognize the sovereignty of the one you bow before. It's, I bend myself, I submit to you, I recognize you as a power, as something important. And then to worship, the word actually means to serve. So it's more than acknowledging, but to live for that one. You express commitment in practical and tangible ways. We bring offerings, which is what Israel did, you know, with the golden calf, or burning incense to the bronze snake, and we serve it. Kevin DeYoung, in his book on the Ten Commandments, gives 5 reasons to forbid idols. He says the first commandment is about who to worship, while the second commandment is about how to worship. And the first reason to forbid idols is that images are forbidden because God is free. You cannot put God into a box. You cannot limit God. You cannot manipulate God. And actually, a representation of God is like, well, in a way, another God to him, to God. It's worshiping something other than the free, beyond your imagination God. Romans 1 verse 22 says, "Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles." You see what's happening there? We make God smaller in the representation. We diminish him. We make him creation rather than the creator. So if you've got this golden calf, a bull, right? It may be a strong animal, but that's God? God is so much more than that. When it's all we see, the calf, we make God smaller. Right? It's also a way to manipulate God. There's a story in 1 Samuel 4 where the Philistines and the Israelites are fighting and the Israelites are losing. And it says, when the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat upon us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh so that it may be with us and save us from the hand of our enemies." Right? So the ark was kind of considered the seat, the place, the presence of God. But let's just move God around to have him do what we want him to do. So we've got him in this box and we can manipulate him, do with him what we want. Now, we do that with graven images, idols, but I think we also can do that with ideas or definitions of God. And that's more of a mental kind of image. When we define God and say, this is what God is and nothing more, this is what he is, we actually make ourselves God over God. Now, how do we handle all the ways God portrays himself? I've got a book by a fellow by the name of Blackaby. He lists over 600 names for God in the Bible, and that's a huge variety. But there's a danger if we just focus in on one or two of those descriptions or names and say, that's God. Right? We limit God. We shortchange God. All right, the second reason for forbidding idols is that God is a jealous God. Right, and that says that in Exodus 20 verse 5, "You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God." Well, jealousy is a fiery passion, isn't it? It burns. Deuteronomy 6:14 says, "Do not follow other gods, the gods of the peoples around you, for the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous God, and his anger will burn against you, and he will destroy you from the face of the land." Well, that's jealousy. It's fiery, right? Now, jealousy is not usually a positive term for us. Could there be a time when jealousy is good, when it's righteous? Well, let me bring it to you the marriage situation. And the marriage metaphor is often used in the Bible to describe the relationship between God and his people. Now, marriage is meant to be an exclusive relationship. Two people commit to each other and totally, nobody else in between. If I bring another person into my marriage, it's going to be a problem. Or let's make it this way. If I bring a picture of my wife and I look at the picture of my wife more than I do my real wife, that's going to be a problem. When a relationship that is supposed to be exclusive is threatened, then that's the place for jealousy. Not only that, but jealousy shows God's passionate involvement in his people. It shows, I want to be with them, and I want to be their God, the only one. A third reason why idolatry is forbidden, idol making is forbidden, is this: belief comes by sound, by the word, and not by being seen. Now that's a distinctively Reformed teaching, and it highlights the Reformation commitment to the Word of God. In Deuteronomy 4 verse 12 it says Then the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. And a few verses later it says again, you saw no form of any kind the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Therefore watch yourselves very carefully, so that you do not become corrupt and make for yourself an idol, an image of any shape, whether formed like a man or a woman. God is a voice. He is sound, a word, the 10 words. Reminds me, quite a while ago, I was teaching a catechism class, and I asked, well, what do you think God looks like? And one of the persons says, well, I don't think he looks like anything. He's a voice. I hear him. And I thought, that is right on. Another passage in the New Testament says this, Romans 10, how then can they call on the one they have believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And a few verses later, consequently, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word of Christ. And so Reformed faith have elevated the place of preaching. A fourth reason to forbid the making of idols, and that is this: God provides his own mediator. The golden calf was in a way supposed to be a mediator between God and his people, but that's not what God provides. God provides Jesus Christ. John 1 verse 14 says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The Word, Jesus, is our mediator. And Colossians 1 verse 15 says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. So God provides the mediator, and it is Jesus. And finally, the fifth reason not to make idols is that God has already created an image, and besides Jesus, and it is us. If you go to Genesis 1, it says there, where God created man, it says, God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. We were made to be the image of God. Now, what does that mean? Well, lots has been written about what that means, but I think there's a couple of things there. And it means this: we represent God in ruling over the creation. So we are a copy of God, or a representative of God, ruling over creation. And it also means that in his image, male and female, he created them, right? In relationship, it means to be in relationship with him. We are that special image, and God is in relationship with us. Now, let's continue going back to Exodus 20. Continue there. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Now, when I read the 10 Commandments, and I do that sometimes in the worship services, I always want to stop there and explain that, because the punishing part, seems so unfair. Punishing the children for the sins of the father to the third and fourth generation. Wow. Doesn't the Bible teach that each person is responsible for their own sin? Well, it does. It does do that. Nevertheless, I think the consequences of sin by the father can impact further generations. Take alcoholism. I'll tell you, if you've got alcoholics, and especially an alcoholic mother, it affects the next generation with fetal alcohol syndrome and in other ways as well, poverty and in so many ways, and to a number of generations. Or, here's another example. If the parents should stop following the Lord, then so do the kids, and so do the grandchildren. Those generations, and it goes to those generations that might see that father, those parents, modeling that, right? Keep in mind that that's what it says there, right? To the third and fourth generation. And those are the generations that the father or the parent might likely see in their lifetime. It goes that far. But then let me suggest that maybe it's a punishment for the original sinner to see the consequences, the impact his sin has on further generations. Now, having said that, I think primarily what it does there, it's meant to be a comparison, all right? Punishment for a while, 3-4 generations, but love is forever. It's for 1,000 generations, right? Look at the difference. 1,000 generations. Now that's a number of completeness. 10 times 10 times 10. 10 is a complete number. You know, the Jewish people like to play with numbers. And then it's 10 to the power of 3. That's another number of completeness. So this is, love forever. Ultimately then, the message here is love wins out. Love is faithful. And the Hebrew word for love there is chesed, which is about covenant faithfulness, keeping covenant, and never letting go. I make a vow to you, and I'm going to keep it, God says. I'll be your God. I'll love you forever. And his love exceeds his wrath. His love is so much greater than his wrath. And I guess just a word about hate and love there, which is very strong language, but it may not be so much about emotions, but rather about choice. To hate is to reject. To hate is not to want a relationship. And if you don't choose God, that's going to impact you and the next generations as well. To love is to choose. It's to commit, to want a relationship. And when we choose God, well, God rejoices because his love for us goes forever. Well, let's turn now to Lord's Day 35. Let's turn to Heidelberg Catechism. Lord's Day 35, question and answer 96. And this is what it says. What is God's will for us in the second commandment? And the answer is this: that we in no way make any image of God, nor worship him in any other way than has been commanded in God's word. Now that's a little bit vague because it doesn't actually say how to do that. It does say don't make any images, so that's one way. But then how do we worship God? How do you think we worship God? Well, in John 4, verse 23, Jesus says, yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. Well, spirit the Greek and Hebrew word for a spirit can mean both breath or wind, and like breath or wind, they're invisible. And so there's this sort of mystery to this. Our spirit means not simply physical, concrete ways, but with our whole being. And then we are to worship in truth. Now, many people have fought over what is truth exactly. But I think it does mean here to worship God as he truly is. And he is not an image. He is not an idol. That would make him something less. So we are to worship him as he truly is, rather than limit him, make him smaller. Question and answer 97 ask, may we then make any image at all? May we then not make any image at all? The answer, God cannot and may not be visibly portrayed in any way. Although creatures may be portrayed, yet God forbids making or having such images if one's intention is to worship them or to worship God through them. And then question and answer 98 continue with that, but may not images be permitted to churches in place of books for the unlearned? And you have to remember that during the Reformation time and throughout much of history, people were illiterate. So how do we teach them? Could we use pictures or images that might help them with that? And here's the answer. No. We should not try to be wiser than God. God wants the Christian community instructed by the living preaching of his word, not by idols that cannot even talk. Now, the beginning of the Reformation saw the reformers being what is called iconoclasts. They destroyed all the icons, the statues, the stained glass, the art in the churches, and then they themselves had very stark buildings in response to this. Is it going too far to say that we can't have these things that are learning devices? If we want to go further, we could say we make books or the Bible an idol sometimes. Right? We talked about that earlier. Or even preaching. I think, in early times, Reformed churches had raised pulpits to raise the honor of the word preached. But I think, whoa, man, that's getting, is that getting there? God does use images to teach, by the way. Joshua 4, for example. They've just crossed the Jordan River and they're instructed to take some stones out of the Jordan River and put them as a monument, to stack them as a monument. And then when children would walk by and say, what do these mean? What are they for? Then they could teach them. There we go. And what about the temple and some of its furniture? Some of it is meant to teach. There's the lamp and some other things, a table and all of those things, and they're meant to teach. And what about the Lord's Supper? Right? It's a teaching tool, something very physical. But again, there is a danger of bowing and worshiping these images, and that's when we go too far. Well, let me close with this. Joan Chittister, in her book, says, God is an experience, not a thing, and not an idea. What do you think of that statement? Experience is not concrete. It tends to change with memory, but it's hard to put into words, and so box it in. Experience speaks more of mystery. It speaks more of relationship, more of love. Right? So we worship and honor God, not through images or idols that diminish him, but in relationship, through love and through the Word. Well, that's it on the second commandment for now. Thanks for watching this video. And I hope you learned something from it. And in the future, we'll hopefully continue with the third commandment. But take care for now, and may God be with you.